Good morning, co-educators. The topic that I will be discussing is organizational communication. My name is Carolina Arjaval from the Laguna State Polytechnic University Los Baños campus. Currently, I am affiliated with the College of Computer Studies teaching mathematics subjects. A very significant dimension in behavior dynamics is communication, as it impacts on the self from outside stimuli and as it impacts on others from the individual. Communication is the lifeblood of any organization. Communicating ideas and information makes any action and coordination possible. Likewise, communication plays a major role in modifying behavior, affecting changes, and achieving goals. Let's have some definition. What is communication? According to Beebe and Masterson, communication is the process of acting on information. But what about human communication? Human communication is the process of making sense out of the world and sharing that sense with others by creating meaning through the use of verbal and non-verbal messages. It therefore says that when we communicate with others, it is not only limited to verbal messages. We also do non-verbal messages such as facial expression, sign languages, and many others. Now let's take a look at the finer details of organizational communication as I discuss the three main models. The first one is the transmission model. The second one is transactional model. And the last one is the constitutive model. The transmission model. In 1948 and 1949, Claude Shannon and Warren Weaver published an article or articles explaining this model. They were working at Bell Telephone Laboratories at that time. So if you would like to take a look, their approach really shows the technological angle of their thoughts. Take note that Bell Telephone Laboratories are the ones who manufacture telephones at that time, and at the same time they have something to do with International Business Machines who created computers later on. So it's more on technology or information technology. They envision a sender or source of information who encodes a message and transmit the message through a channel of some sort. The message is then decoded on the other end and received by a receiver. You can say that this is very reminiscent of the phone system. For example, the principal sent a voice message to the head teacher. The message says, "We will have a meeting at 11 a.m. The message goes through the communication system and it arrives at the voice mailbox. As soon as the head teacher listens to it, the message was sent and received. Noise, however, is another part of this model. It might happen between the encoding and decoding of message. Noise could be considered as a garbled message or a static on the line, and that would complicate the communication process. According to this model, communication successfully occurred when the message has been sent and received. It is some kind of a linear or a one-way model. A lot of people would say it is analogous to a pipeline because the source comes from one end and flows down to the other end. Here, you will also notice that there is no feedback and no nonverbal communication. This is considered as a major weakness by some people in terms of how we understand face-to-face communication. It's like the same thing as sending a text message, or an email, or a voicemail, a telegram, or even a letter. You sent it, but you don't necessarily know when or if the receiver actually received the message. But as soon as they decode that information, or shall we say, received the information, then the communication has occurred. It is sometimes called the container model because the meaning of thoughts are contained in the words. This model is very useful if you would like to explain how information technology works, or how communication works anytime if you are sending it through any type of technological communication channel. Now, it has limits because it doesn't explain the complexities and the human dynamics of face-to-face communication. The second model is the transactional model. This model compensates for some of the limitations of the transmission model. In 1967, Paul Watzlawick and his colleagues built their models from some previous writings and looked at the interactional features of communication. A couple of years later, Dean Barland published his work that expressed same ideas but with slightly different wordings. Now, all the ideas that came out from the year 1967 to 1970 were all aligned and combined. Most textbooks would refer to this model as the transactional model. It has some key differences with the transmission model. They don't believe that meaning is contained in the words. Instead, they think meaning is in people. Meaning comes through interaction. Communication process is largely about creating shared meaning. It doesn't start at understanding other people. People have to work toward that through communication. According to this model also, people are both senders and receivers at the same time. This model integrates nonverbal communication and feedback. If we go back to our example of the principal informing the head teacher about the meeting at 11 a.m., the following conversation may happen. We are going to have a meeting at 11 a.m. The head teacher would answer back, "We can have it in the boardroom. We just installed a new air conditioning system there." The principal would respond, "That would be great." And finally, the head teacher would say, "I will go around and inform the others." The exchange of information and assuming the role of both senders and receivers are clearly shown in this kind of conversation. The two were able to arrive in an agreement that would lead to a course of action. There are other features in the transactional model, such as shared field experiences of the sender and the receiver. Field experiences can be culture, background, age, education, mood, financial security, gender, and many others. The transactional model also talks about simultaneous message sending, noise, and feedback. Noise can either be physical, semantic, intrapersonal, or interpersonal. Therefore, it's no longer the same as the first model wherein the noise is just the physical manifestation of technological problems such as garbled message or static on the line. A lot of people says Barnlund's model is taken by critics as the most systematic model of communication. Now, the third model is called the constitutive model. In 1999, Robert Craig wrote in an article that communication is constitutive, or communication creates. It produces our social world. He said that communication is a driving force in our lives and our relationships. The same idea was expressed by Manning in 2014 in his article at page 433. He said, "Communication is not a mere tool for expressing social reality, but also a means of creating it." According to this model, communication creates meaning and thus reality. Rather than merely transmitting predetermined information, what you say matters, and it makes up our social world. Now, why is communication important in our educational organization? Workplace communication is very important in our schools because it allows faculty members and students to be productive and function effectively. Stakeholders can experience an increase in morale, productivity, and commitment if they are able to communicate up and down the communication chain in an organization. Why is effective communication important in an organization? Effective communication is important for the development of an organization. It is something which helps the manager to perform the basic functions of management such as planning, organizing, motivating, and controlling. Communication also helps in building people's attitude. We are familiar with the upward, downward, and horizontal flow of communication, but there are some other additional ways for which information flows. We have the diagonal flow of communication wherein someone from the lower level would act as a representative and communicates or send information to the head of another entity. And it's called diagonal. Such cases were manifested by some recent whistleblower, for example. And on the positive side, it could be a liaison officer bringing documents to someone he or she knows, to like a head of the department in GSIS or Pag-ibig or some other government institutions to make the transactions easier or faster. Now, there are two types of communication: the formal and informal communication. Formal communication refers to the flow of official information through proper, predetermined channels and routes. The flow of information is controlled and needs deliberate effort to be properly communicated. Formal communication follows a hierarchical structure and chain of command. The informal communication is the casual and unofficial form of communication wherein the information is exchanged spontaneously between two or more persons without conforming the prescribed official rules, processes, system, formalities, and chain of command. Examples of formal communications are the following: letter from a parent to a teacher or vice versa. email from the department head, notice boards of every college, memorandum from the Secretary of Education, and some formal verbal communication such as presentation, speech, or conferences. Examples of informal communications are the following. We have casual conversation between colleagues, like co-faculty or fellow students. It could be an informal comment from a friend or some gossip from the grapevine.